Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I want you to try and imagine, just for a second, drafting the ultimate blueprint for a newly independent nation. We're talking about a country grappling with a truly staggering scale of historical inequalities, overwhelming poverty, and massive illiteracy. How on earth do you ensure that future governments don't just, protect basic freedoms, but actively roll up their sleeves and actively work to build a fair, educated society? Well, the architects of the Indian Constitution solved this puzzle by creating a really fascinating roadmap known as the Directive Principles of State Policy. Today, we're going to explore exactly how this constitutional guide was designed to tackle inequality head-on, with a special focus on the right to education. To make sure we don't get bogged down in all the legal jargon, here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, Introduction to DSPS. Number 2, Rights versus Directives. Number 3, the Constitutional Compass. Number 4, the right to education. And finally, number 5, protecting weaker sections. Let's dive in. Starting off with Section 1, Introduction to DSPS, and the roadmap found in Part 4. So, where do these principles actually live within this massive historic document? There are exactly 16 articles, spanning from Article 36 to 51, housed right there in Part 4 of the Constitution. And unlike other sections that might dictate, say, how elections are run or how the courts operate, these 16 articles are solely dedicated to instructing the government on how to better serve the nation. You can kind of think of them as a set of long-term goals and moral instructions handed down by the founders to literally every future government. Moving right along to Section 2, Rights versus Directives. Let's draw the line between them. To really grasp how unique these instructions are, we have to clearly distinguish them from something you might be a lot more familiar with. And this setup brilliantly illustrates the dichotomy. On one side, you have your fundamental rights in Part 3. These are for you, the citizen, and they are legally enforceable. Meaning, if someone violates your fundamental right to free speech, you can march right into a court and demand justice. But on the other side, we have the Directive Principles of State Policy, or DSPS, in Part 4. These are instructions specifically for the government, and crucially, they are non-justiciable. That means if the government fails to implement these policies, you actually can't take them to court to enforce them. There's zero legal penalty for the state if they fall short. Which brings us to Section 3, the Constitutional Compass, and understanding Article 37. Because their non-justiciable nature brings up a very obvious, almost glaring question. You're naturally probably wondering, if a citizen cannot sue the government over these guidelines, do they even matter at all? Are they just, nice words on a piece of paper with absolutely no real teeth? Well, the Constitution actually anticipated this exact skepticism. Article 37 answers this by declaring these principles absolutely fundamental to the governance of the country. So even without the threat of a lawsuit, the Constitution makes it the explicit, undeniable duty of the state to apply these principles whenever they are making laws or executing policies. They essentially act as a mandatory moral and political compass. Whether it's the legislature drafting a new bill or the executive branch implementing a program, they are constitutionally obligated to keep these directives front and center. And just a quick heads up on the legal jargon here, when the Constitution says it's the duty of the state, it's not just talking about regional provinces like Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu. According to Article 12, the state, well, it refers to the entire country's apparatus, the whole shebang. This includes the national parliament, the central government, all the state legislatures, and literally every single local authority operating within India. The responsibility rests on the shoulders of the entire governmental machine. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar realized a really hard truth here. Political democracy, like the right to vote, just isn't enough on its own. I mean, it was granted immediately, but he knew that true equality requires economic and social leveling too. And the DSPP was designed to be the ultimate blueprint to achieve exactly that. Let's look at how this plays out in practice in Section 4, the right to education, focusing on Articles 41 and 45. This brings us to Article 41. Where we transition from these broad, sweeping democratic ideals down to tackling one of India's biggest, most tangible post-independence challenges. Under this specific directive, the state is explicitly instructed to make effective provisions to secure several vital lifelines for its citizens. We're talking the right to work, the right to public assistance, and, crucially for our explainer today, the right to education. Look at what Article 41 is actually targeting right here. It's demanding support for citizens facing unemployment, old age, sickness, disablement, and illiteracy. The brilliant logic of this article recognizes that to elevate citizens out of the vicious cycles of unemployment or poor health, education is the absolute fundamental stepping stone. It's the core provision the government simply must provide to empower people to overcome all these other societal hurdles. But if we step forward just a few pages to Article 45, the Constitution puts a surprisingly aggressive timeline on this exact goal. Seriously, the founders were not messing around here. They set a strict 10-year target from the commencement of the Constitution. The directive clearly stated that the state shall endeavor to provide, within a period of 10 years, free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14. Keep in mind, to put this into perspective, at independence, India's literacy rate was hovering roughly around 12%. Wiping out illiteracy in a single decade, that was a monumental, staggeringly ambitious target. But they knew fighting illiteracy couldn't wait. It required immediate, aggressive action in the very first decade of the new republic. Which takes us to our final part today, Section 5, Protecting Weaker Sections, under Article 46. So this brings us to Article 46, a directive that recognizes a harsh reality. Free education means absolutely nothing if historical barriers keep you from even getting into the classroom. This article focuses intensely on protecting the educational and economic interests of society's most vulnerable and historically marginalized populations. Let's break down the objectives here. It demands that the state promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the people. It explicitly names the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, mandating that the government must actively protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. This is a huge acknowledgement that true equality requires specialized, deeply focused support for those who have suffered from historical discrimination by upper castes. Now, the reality of this situation today is, well, complex. While various governments have indeed launched numerous upliftment programs and policies over the decades to try and fulfill this directive, a significant portion of these vulnerable populations still feel disconnected and marginalized. Sincere, ongoing efforts remain absolutely essential to combat persisting exploitation and to ensure that all marginalized communities are fully integrated as truly equal citizens. And that brings us right back to the core tension of the directive principles of state policy. They aren't legally enforceable, yet they are the constitutionally mandated soul of the nation's governance. So I'll leave you with this final thought. If these directives are truly the moral compass of the nation, designed to build a society totally free of illiteracy and exploitation, how well is the government navigating its constitutional duty to educate and protect every single citizen today? Take a look around and decide for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.